Like I said to start the last video, my emotions are gonna be taken out of this. I'm not gonna be upset, yelling, angry, any of this stuff, because I'm gonna take care of my well-being. It's the same story over and over and over again, game after game after game, week after week after week, month after month after month, year after year after year at this point. We all know what it is. At the end of the day, I'm here to break things down and speak the truth. Take it or leave it. And man, let me say this. Playing the game of basketball on the court and having that vision in front of you versus watching a basketball game on the screen and seeing the whole picture of what's going on are two completely different experiences. And Steph Curry has not played the last couple of games. He has not been with the team the last couple of games, which means he's watching on a screen just like you and me. And I hope that when he sees these games in this big picture kind of way, the way we see it, hopefully he has eyes too and can see the utter nonsensical nature of the small lineups that Steve Kerr uses and the senseless rotations and the pieces that Steve Kerr decides to use, and be able to think for himself and question, what is that? Why is this the starting lineup? And why is this guy in rotation over this guy? And why does he continue to play regardless of how terrible he's being on the floor? I hope so, because problems must be identified before they can be solved. Clearly, for the Warriors and their locker room, nothing has been discussed in terms of, hey, are these small lineups still working for us? Did it stop working for us at some point? Do we continue to go with this plan and be stubborn and make no adjustments? Or is it time to switch things up? Somebody or a group of guys on this team has to take charge and demand changes. Because if they don't soon enough, the Warriors are going to be lucky to be a play-in team again. Having said that, we're going to go over all the things that went wrong in this game against the Nuggets on the road. Steph Curry, not available. Jimmy Butler ended up being available. He was questionable. Moses Moody was questionable heading into this game. Both Butler and Moody are having back issues, and that's not good. But yes, we'll go over the individual performances, and we'll go over all the terrible things that Steve Kerr did as usual. If that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Let's get started. So, Steve Kerr went back at it. The small lineup, a senseless small lineup. I want to remind you guys every time, the reason you go small, any NBA team, the reason you would go small is because you have an offensive advantage. That is why you go small. Does a small lineup for the Warriors with no Steph Curry in it have any advantage on offense whatsoever? If anybody can tangibly explain why you would go small if you're the Warriors with no Steph Curry, I would love to hear it in the comments. Every so often you get these Steve Kerr apologists trying to give him all the excuses in the world despite the fact that he's been a coach of this team for over a decade about, oh, it's early in the season and he's experimenting, as if he shouldn't know this team like the back of his hand. I just want to say, JJ Redick has been absolutely incredible with the Lakers so far this season. He's got Luka Doncic playing out of this world. He's got Austin Reeves playing out of this world. And you know what that means? That means JJ Redick persistently goes to something that works. That is why Luka and Austin Reeves are tearing it up, because he does not go away from what works the way Steve Kerr does. And the Lakers even beat the Blazers without LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and Austin Reeves. They were missing all three of those guys, and Redick still beat the Blazers. If JJ Redick had the roster that Steve Kerr has right now, the Warriors may very well be undefeated this season. You got an argument against that? Let's hear it too. Anyway, as I've been saying for a while, Quinton Post has been really reliable as a starting center for this team. Every time Quinton Post is in the starting lineup, every time Quinton Post is in that center spot and pushing Draymond to the power forward spot where he belongs, and Jimmy Butler is at the 2-guard spot where he is really good, and then you got Kuminga at the 3, and in tonight's case you got Potts at the 1. Unfortunately, Steve Kerr decided to put Moses Moody into the starting lineup. It's well deserved. I think Moses Moody should be in the starting lineup, but I think he should be starting over Jonathan Kuminga because Moses Moody has been a better defender, and that is what the Warriors absolutely need in that starting lineup. You must prioritize great defense first over anything offense when you already have Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler in the starting lineup. But in tonight's case, there was no Steph Curry. So you choose between Kuminga and Moody. You have to choose between one of them. You don't start the both of them. And then once again, run a small lineup and you put Butler at the power forward spot and you put Draymond at the center spot. Draymond against Jokic at the center spot is a mismatch in favor of Jokic. Jimmy Butler at power forward against Aaron Gordon is a disadvantage for Jimmy Butler, who's dealing with back issues. He shouldn't be posting up against Aaron Gordon. He should be posting up against either Jamal Murray, Christian Braun, or even Cam Johnson. All of those are an advantage for Jimmy Butler. You have to put your players in a position of advantage, not a disadvantage. Boy, my throat is not feeling so well right now. Bear with me. So yes, all Steve Kerr did by going small is allow the Nuggets to have a bunch of mismatches that they can attack, get out to an early lead. They had a 12-3 lead in the first 5 minutes of this game. Think about that for a second. You run a small lineup for an offensive advantage and you score 3 points in the first 5 minutes of the game. And that's almost always what happens when the Warriors run these small lineups. Even with Steph Curry in it, they go on these insane scoring droughts. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a long time. And small lineups have context. If you have a lot of hustle guys and defenders in there to balance out some of your smallness, that would be okay. Unfortunately, whenever Steve Kerr runs a 3-guard lineup and all these things, Buddy Hield is always in there. Potts is always in there. Spencer is always in there. There's always 2 deficits defensively on the floor at the same time. You're running a 3-guard lineup and the Warriors break apart every single time. But yes, the Nuggets game plan is pretty simple. You throw 2 at Jimmy Butler, the Warriors' best player tonight, and then you take him away, and then everything else is left to the devices of Potts, Moody, Kuminga, and Draymond. And to be fair to Draymond, he had a really good shooting performance in this game. But Kuminga, Potts, and Moody were atrocious in the starting lineup together. These guys shot a combined 7 of 29 from the floor. That is good for 24% from the field. Not one of them scored in double figures in this game. Non-impactful on offense, all 3 of them. Moses Moody at least has an excuse of back issues. What is the excuse of Potts and Kuminga in this game? What an embarrassment for Joe Lacob and his 2 timeline plan. This is what you're gonna get when Steph Curry is done and Jimmy Butler is gonna be out of here and you're left with Potts and Kuminga. Good luck, Joe Lacob. I'm interested in OG Anunoby, but I'm gonna hang up the phone as soon as you mention Jonathan Kuminga. I wanna crack at Lauri Markkanen, but Brandon Podziemski is untouchable. This is the Warriors front office for you. The most delusional, non-basketball minded group I've ever seen in my life. And I just gotta say about Draymond, man, even though he had a good shooting performance in this game, his turnovers are so detrimental and nonsensical, and it seems to happen like every other game at least, if not every single game. And tonight also, he's just throwing these telegraph passes that the defense can read like a book, and these turnovers are really hurting the momentum of his own team. I just question at this point if Draymond should have as big of a responsibility with the ball that he has at this point of his career. He should still make plays, but I think he may have the ball just a little bit too much. And it especially doesn't work when there are small guys on the floor and there are not enough screeners. Good screens happen with big bodies on the floor. It makes it easier for passes to be converted because screens create more space for the players. There's more space to pass the ball. If the screens aren't working because your guys on the floor are tiny, then there's less room for error, and that's how you turn the ball over more and more and more. And Steve Kerr is always upset about these turnovers without considering why they're happening in the first place. But yes, the Nuggets abused the smallness of the Warriors early on, exposed Pods in mismatches because there's so many mismatches to be had on the floor, and they get out to an 18-6 start. And then Steve Kerr smartens up and brings in Trayce Jackson-Davis and Quinton Post at the same time to form a big lineup that he almost never ever uses. And considering the fact that the Nuggets had all the momentum in the world, they were able to break that momentum. And in the 5 minutes that those 2 guys were on the floor for the Warriors in that first quarter, they ultimately ended up losing 12-11. 12-11 sounds a lot better than 18-6, doesn't it? And as a matter of fact, it was Quinton Post and Trayce Jackson-Davis doing all the scoring. They had a combined 9 points in the span of like 3 minutes. And think about the fact that the Warriors only scored 21 points in the first quarter. That's pretty good for the 2 bigs on the floor. But see, even when you have 2 bigs on the floor at the same time, it's a problem when the rest of your defenders are weak defenders. You can't have 3 weak defenders on the floor at the same time and expect 2 good defenders to cover for 3 players. It just cannot happen. You have to have 3 surplus defenders for you to formulate a good lineup. And Steve Kerr has plenty of pieces to be able to do that. He's just not doing it because he's prioritizing certain players. Mainly, I would say Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is in there all day and night, and he's just absolutely awful. Steve Kerr has him playing POA, and Steve Kerr thinks that that's okay, which is absolutely hysterical and hilarious, especially if you're not a Warriors fan and you're watching this. You are laughing at this team. You're watching Buddy Hield get crossed over by Aaron Gordon, crossed out of his shoes. Aaron Gordon drives right by him and throws a dunk over Quinton Post. And Jamal Murray is blowing by Buddy Hield all day and night. Christian Brown, whoever that Buddy Hield is in front of, is blowing by all day and night. And yet Steve Kerr throws out these 3-guard lineups or bad defensive lineups, including Buddy Hield. Will Richard just had an incredible game, and he's nowhere to be found in that first quarter or much of the second quarter. Steve Kerr just has to watch Buddy Hield stink up the floor all day and night, and it doesn't seem to matter to him. No matter what Buddy Hield does, he will keep playing him. He will never be out of the rotation. But a guy like Guy Santos, who actually absolutely needs to be in rotation over Buddy Hield, is getting DNPs all day and night. He played in garbage minutes in this game. And yet, the last time Guy Santos played a game, he was impactful, and Steve Kerr after the game talked about how they need Guy Santos and he's really good when he's out there. The lips say one thing, the actions say something completely different. For example, this lineup would look a lot more functional and it would look a lot better if Guy Santos was in here instead of Buddy Hield. Matter of fact, insert anybody else. You put GP2 in here, you put Will Richard in here over Buddy Hield, and they would look better defensively. You keep throwing guys out there for offense. They're non-impactful offensively, and they're a negative, constant negative, and you keep throwing them out there. Steve Kerr is a charlatan. Steve Kerr is an absolute fraud. And despite the fact that the Trayce Jackson-Davis and Quinton Post combination was successful in that first quarter, Steve Kerr never went back to it again. As a matter of fact, in that third quarter, he would throw out another 3-guard lineup. Now he had Will Richard in there instead of Trayce Jackson-Davis, and now it's a 3-guard lineup, and the defense is not good enough. And it's been frustrating to watch Pat Spencer take on the role of backup point guard because he is constantly in these lineups where there are not enough screeners, there is not enough defense, there is not enough transition defense, there is not enough one-on-one defense capability. Everybody has to double all the time, everybody's getting penetrated all the time like they're trying to conceive a baby, and it makes these guys look worse than they should be. It makes Pat Spencer look worse, it makes Pods look worse, it makes Steph Curry look worse, it makes everybody look worse than they should be. And ultimately, again, even for Buddy Hield, it's not his fault that Steve Kerr decides to put him out there all day and night despite all the struggles that he is showing, all the goofy plays that he's doing, forcing him to be a POA when he is a 3-point specialist. It's not his fault. It's not Buddy Hield's fault. It's not Potts' fault. It's not Kuminga's fault. It's not anybody's fault that these lineups are being used. All of this falls on nobody but Steve Kerr. But yeah, I've talked about this before. The combination of Pods and Kuminga on the floor is detrimental to the Warriors. Their defense is not good when these guys are sharing the floor, and they were so bad together in that starting lineup. At some point, these two were easily the worst players on the team. And these are the games where they have to step up. When Steph Curry is out, you have to do more and show what you can do when you have a bigger and greater opportunity. And these guys crapped all over the floor tonight. And quite frankly, some of these lineups that Steve Kerr uses, they would work out better if some of these guys were simply more versatile and capable of doing more. Unfortunately, they're not. The important thing is to identify that they're not, and identify what player can do what and what player cannot do what, and make sure that you don't put them in compromising positions. That is the job of the coach, and Steve Kerr doesn't recognize any of that and just throws whatever guy out there and think that it's going to be okay without any logical explanation. As far as I'm concerned, the Warriors lost this game before it ever started when Steve Kerr decided to go with a small lineup and continues to not reward Quinton Post for great play. Quinton Post tonight was perfect from the field, 6 of 6. He's the only one who's really thriving out there. He's got 14 points, but he can't get more than 10 minutes per half. Leave it to Steve Kerr to go away from the players that play well and combinations that work well, and then go right back to things that don't work. You want to put Will Richard into the rotation? Take Buddy Hield out of there and have Will Richard replace Buddy Hield because they play the same position? Why are you taking out a power forward or a center to leave Buddy Hield in there and still play Will Richard at the same time? It's completely senseless. No coach in the NBA does this. No coach in his right mind in the NBA would do something like this. Only Steve Kerr does it, gets away with it, and gets no national media coverage about it whatsoever. Nobody, not a single media personnel addresses this issue ever. You can obviously forget about Warriors media because these guys are connected to the Warriors and they cannot be talking trash and directly criticizing Steve Kerr. Why? Because connections and accessibility is on the line. If you are a reporter or a journalist for the Warriors, your neck and job and career is on the line if you're not careful with what you say. I don't know if you guys know the name Drew Schiller. Drew Schiller and Grant Liffman had a TV show about the Warriors and they were thriving together. Drew Schiller was a Steve Kerr apologist. One day, he made one comment about Kevin Durant and his situation with the Warriors long after Kevin Durant was gone. He made one tweet about it, and Steve Kerr decided to publicly call Drew Schiller out. Drew Schiller no longer had a show to go to, and he no longer has a career in the NBA. Grant Liffman was eventually hired by the Hawks in a front office position, and now he's back with the Warriors as a sideline reporter. Behave, and you'll get the opportunities with the Warriors. Say one bad thing about Steve Kerr, your job is on the line. There's a lot of fear going on when it comes to Steve Kerr and this organization. And that's why you need me, because I don't give a hoot. I will always tell you the truth about what this guy is doing against this team. So in that third quarter, the Warriors had a chance to try to keep this game alive. But like I said, Steve Kerr went to a nonsensical three-guard lineup. Jimmy Butler cannot protect it. And the Nuggets expand on their lead. And by the end of it, they turned a 16-point lead into a 20-point lead. And that's how you end the game earlier than it should. And by the fourth quarter, that starting fourth quarter unit had no juice left. The Nuggets had too much momentum and the game was over before you knew it. And then Steve Kerr threw out this lineup. And honestly, I would rather he use this lineup compared to some of the lineups that he used in this game with Buddy Hield included. Buddy Hield needs to stop playing basketball for this team and the Warriors need to trade him as soon as they are able to trade him. They have to find a way to trade him. If you have to add an asset to trade him, you must shed that contract because the Warriors, as we all know, have way too many guards and Buddy Hield, the worst of them, keeps eating a chunk of these minutes just because he's a favorite of Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr sure is making it very obvious that he has a favoritism for Buddy Hield no matter what he does on the floor, even though he literally threatened everybody's position with Will Richard in the previous game, talking about if you're not gonna play basketball, then Will Richard is right there to take your minutes. But like I said tonight, Will Richard didn't take Buddy Hield's minutes. Will Richard simply played next to Buddy Hield. So make that make sense. The Warriors need more Guy Santos and less Buddy Hield in three-guard lineups for the love of God. And yes, it is unfortunate for Moses Moody, who finally cooled off in a bad way, 1 of 9 from the field tonight. It's not his fault that he was playing in poor lineups, no space created, no opportunities to get good shots off, and he had a back issue on top of that. Jonathan Kuminga continues to play poorly when it matters the most. In the previous game, in the closing minutes against the Kings, he was an absolute mess. And in tonight's game, without Steph Curry, but Jimmy Butler's back in there, and you need to make an impact if you're Kuminga, was a complete no-show in the first half. Him and Potts combined scored 2 points in the first half. 1 of 9 shooting from the field. Absolutely unacceptable. This is incompetent. The difference between Moody, Potts, Kuminga is that Kuminga makes more money than both Moody and Potts combined. You run into a tough matchup, tough team, you have to find a way to make an impact for this team. And he is not showing consistent two-way play for this team by any measure. Again, I think when Steph Curry is ready to come back, and let's hope that that is soon. Apparently he is feeling better. We'll see if he's ready for the next game coming up. But when Steph Curry does come back, Potts, of course, needless to say, needs to be out of that starting lineup, never be there again. Quentin Post needs to be in that starting lineup as the center of this team and make the game easier for Draymond and Jimmy Butler. And then Moses Moody needs to be in that starting lineup over Kuminga for defensive purposes, the 3 and D purposes. He makes more sense and fits better with that unit than Kuminga does. Kuminga can do his damage coming off the bench. We've seen that before. If this is what you're gonna do as a starter eating up $23 million this season, this is not gonna be good enough for the Warriors. Clearly. And if you want to criticize Jimmy Butler for not being able to do better in a game like this, well, let me just say, first of all, he's getting double teamed by the Nuggets. That is their game plan. He can only do so much when that happens in that starting unit. But more importantly, Why did the Warriors trade for Jimmy Butler? Why? The Warriors don't like to make trades and they didn't want to give up Andrew Wiggins. So why did they trade for Jimmy Butler? Because they were failing with this roster with Steph Curry. Steph Curry couldn't get this roster over the hump. What makes you think that Jimmy Butler can? That is why this team needs both Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler at the same time to complete this very incomplete roster. If you're missing Steph Curry, needless to say, I think it's hard for them to win a game. If you're missing Jimmy Butler, it is very hard for Steph Curry to carry this roster over the hump. You need the both of them. Steph Curry was not able to win with Kuminga as one of the primary contributors. Jimmy Butler has not been able to win with Kuminga as one of the primary contributors. You can absolutely say that Steve Kerr is hurting the process of maybe getting Kuminga to be more effective for this team, but Steve Kerr's not going anywhere, is he? And the same thing keeps happening over and over and over again, doesn't it? So ask yourself again if you're a fan of Jonathan Kuminga. Is this the right situation for him? Is this the right team for him? If you really love Kuminga so much, and if you think that he should be thriving, then you would be wise to think that he can do much better on a different team. If you had a coach who prioritized individual talents and gave Kuminga more opportunities to go one-on-one, get more touches, and have these various segments where you're featuring him and all these things, great. The Warriors don't have that. They have a charlatan for a coach. It doesn't work. Steve Kerr needs a type, and Kuminga simply is not that. And I think when the trade deadline comes, the situation will speak for itself. We'll see what happens. Anyway, the situation remains rough even when Steph Curry comes back. As long as Steve Kerr continues to do clown stuff, the Warriors are going to continue to drop games. And they're 5-5 right now. They're back to being in a play-in situation. Shocker. And like I said, unless Steph Curry and anybody else on this team that matters speaks up and enforces some kind of change in Steve Kerr, this stuff is going to continue to happen over and over and over again, like Groundhog's Day. All we can do is watch on patiently and hope for the best, because this roster is really good. And if you formulate it correctly, if you put the right combinations out there from quarter to quarter, they should actually be one of the best teams in the league. Like I said, if JJ Redick had this roster, I think the Warriors will be a top 3 team in the league right now. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. As always, Steph Curry is the GOAT.